A Nordic home sits at minus 20 degrees Celsius outside. The power has been out for 6 hours. Inside, it is still warm. Meanwhile, your home loses half its heat within the first hour of a blackout. That gap is not luck. It is not better insulation. It is centuries of knowledge your heating bill has quietly replaced. Modern electric heating erased something important. It erased the instinct to lock heat inside before it escapes. Nordic builders understood a principle that most of us have completely forgotten. Every technique they used, every curtain, every stone floor, every wool-stuffed gap was designed to trap warmth first, not chase it later. 7 specific methods, each one fast, each one cheap. Not one of them requires electricity. Sven sits in his study right now. One candle burning, wool blanket across his lap, the room is warm. Here is exactly how that is possible. To understand why Nordic homes retain heat so well, you have to understand what Nordic winters actually demand. We are not talking about a cold snap. We are talking about sustained temperatures of minus 20 degrees Celsius, common across Sweden, Finland, and Norway for months at a stretch. Power outages in these regions are not rare emergencies. They are expected events. Passive heating is not a lifestyle choice in Scandinavia. It is survival infrastructure. It has been for centuries. Go back to the 1800s and you find Scandinavian rural builders working with what they had. Wool, turf, stone, dense timber. These were not primitive fallbacks. They were precisely engineered responses to an environment that would kill you if you got it wrong. Finnish historical records document turf roofs and moss-packed walls as standard construction. Swedish rural homes used layered sheep's wool not just for clothing but pressed directly into wall cavities and door frames. Builders in the far north understood thermal mass, draft resistance, and radiant heat reflection before those terms existed in any engineering textbook. They understood it because getting it wrong meant a family did not survive February. That knowledge did not disappear. It evolved. Modern Nordic passive houses, built today in 2025 and 2026, still outperform most global residential standards on heat retention per heated square meter. According to OECD data from 2024, Nordic homes rank among the lowest in energy consumption per heated square meter in the developed world. That is not an accident of geography. Nordic homes are cold weather machines, refined across 2 centuries of documented building practice. Swedish and Finnish building researchers have validated these methods. This is not folk myth dressed up as wisdom. These techniques have been tested, recorded, and applied in contemporary off-grid construction. What makes them remarkable is not their complexity. It is their simplicity. Each one addresses a single point of heat loss and closes it permanently, with materials that cost almost nothing and last for decades. And the first method on this list is the one most people overlook every single evening. Here is exactly how this is going to work. Number 1 on this list is the method that stops the biggest source of heat loss in your home before it even starts. And most people walk right past it every night without a second thought. It is 4 in the afternoon in rural Dalarna, Sweden. The sun is already dropping below the tree line. Outside, the temperature is falling fast toward minus 15. You can hear the timbers in the walls contracting as the cold tightens its grip. The floorboards creak once, sharply, as the structure adjusts. A thin skin of frost is already forming at the very edge of the window glass, creeping inward from the corners in slow white fingers. Inside, a farmhouse built in the 1880s is beginning to lose its battle with the cold, not through its walls, not through its roof, but through its windows. Glass is one of the worst thermal barriers in any building. It conducts cold directly from the outside air into your room. By the time darkness falls, an uncovered window is essentially a hole in your wall. This is not a modern discovery. Swedish rural builders in the 1800s understood it precisely. The Ullgardener tradition, heavy curtains woven from sheep's wool, developed as a direct response to this problem. These were not decorative. They were functional thermal seals. Thick, dense, floor-to-ceiling wool panels pulled shut at sunset to create a dead air layer between the cold glass and the warm room. The fabric was woven tight enough that you could press your palm against it and feel almost no cold radiating through from the glass behind. The wool itself smelled faintly of lanolin, that waxy animal warmth that never quite left the fiber no matter how many times it was washed. Combined with internal wooden shutters, latched firmly at the center, the effect was immediate and measurable. Here is what the physics looks like. A single glazed window loses heat at roughly 10 times the rate of an insulated wall. Even a double glazed window loses heat significantly faster than the surrounding structure. The moment you cover that glass with a dense thermal layer, you interrupt the conduction cycle. The cold cannot reach the room air. The warm air cannot reach the cold glass. You have created a buffer zone. That buffer zone is doing the work your heating system would otherwise have to do all night. The documented thermal effect is not small. Research into passive heating methods confirms that layered wool curtains combined with internal shutters can raise indoor temperature by 5 to 7 degrees Celsius within minutes of being closed. Not hours. Minutes. That is not the heating system working. That is the absence of heat loss, producing a measurable temperature gain almost immediately. The room was already warm. The curtains simply stopped it from leaving. Modern passive houses across Sweden and Finland still use this principle in 2025. The materials have updated slightly. Thermal-lined curtains with dense wool batting are commercially available across Scandinavia, typically running between 50 and 120 euros per window. That is a one-time cost. The curtains last decades. The saving is every single night of every winter for the life of the building. There is a specific protocol to this that matters. The curtains must be closed before the glass gets cold, not after. Once the glass surface has dropped to near freezing, the cold it radiates into the room takes time to reverse. The Nordic practice was always to close shutters and curtains at or just before sunset, while the glass still held some residual warmth from the day. The sequence is, close the wood shutters first, draw the wool curtains second, seal the bottom edge against the floor or sill, no gaps. Gaps defeat the entire system. A 2-centimeter gap at the base of a curtain allows cold air to pool on the floor and spread across the room within minutes. The Nordic farmhouse curtains were weighted at the hem, with small iron rings sewn into the fabric specifically to prevent this. You could hear those rings scrape faintly against the floorboards as the curtain was drawn. That sound meant the seal was good. That sound meant the room would hold its warmth until morning. You would think someone would have said something. Nobody did. Somewhere in the last 50 years of centrally heated homes, this knowledge quietly vanished from common practice. People stopped closing their shutters. Curtains became decorative. Windows became feature walls. And heating bills climbed every single winter to compensate for the heat bleeding silently out through the glass after dark. The best method on this list is near the end, and it is worth the wait. But this first method is the foundation. Every other technique works better in a room where the glass has already been sealed. Wool curtains are not optional. They are the first line of defense in any passive heating system, and the Nordic tradition documented them as such for over 2 centuries. If that one surprised you, the next one is bigger. Coming in at number 2. This one has roots in Finnish sauna culture, and what it does to a room's temperature overnight is something most people would not believe until they measure it. It is mid-morning in a Finnish off-grid cabin outside Tampere. The wood stove has been burning since dawn. The air smells of birch smoke and pine resin. The cast iron door of the stove ticks and pops as the metal expands, but the occupant is not just heating the air, he is charging the floor. Stone and tile floors are not passive surfaces. They are thermal batteries. Every hour of exposure to sunlight or radiant heat loads them with stored energy that they will release slowly, steadily, for hours after the heat source is gone. This principle comes directly from the Finnish Kuus tradition. The Kuus is the stone heater at the center of a Finnish sauna. Its entire design is built around thermal mass. Stones absorb intense heat over hours, then release it gently and consistently long after the fire dies. Finnish builders applied this same logic to home construction. Stone floors, tile floors, and dense flagstone passages were positioned to receive maximum sunlight during the short winter days. The floor did the work the sun could only partially do. The technique in practice is straightforward. During daylight hours, any available sunlight is directed onto stone or tile surfaces. Rugs and coverings are removed from these areas entirely. The floor absorbs as much solar gain as possible. As evening arrives, rugs are placed back over the stone. This is critical. The rug does not add heat. It traps the heat the stone has already stored. Without the rug, the stone radiates upward and outward equally, losing energy to the ceiling and walls as fast as it gains it. With the rug, the stored warmth is directed into the room through convection from the rug surface and radiant heat from the stone beneath. The room does not cool evenly. It holds. You can feel the difference when you walk across it barefoot at midnight. The stone beneath the rug is still faintly warm to the touch through the fabric. Not hot, just present, just enough. Finnish traditional insulation records document this in off-grid cabin construction. Stone flooring in cabins near the Arctic Circle was not accidental. It was the thermal engine of the building, sized and positioned to absorb maximum heat from the wood stove during the morning burn, and then to release that heat through the night while the occupants slept. The cabin stayed warm not because the fire burned all night. The fire went out at 10. The floor ran the rest of the shift, which, looking back, was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, trusting a stone floor to carry you through a -20 night with no backup heat. But the records show it worked, consistently. For generations of Finnish families who could not afford to burn wood continuously and had no electricity to fall back on. The cost of implementing this today depends on what your floor is already made of. If you have stone or tile floors, the cost is almost nothing. Expose them to available sunlight during the day, add a rug at night. Under €20 for a rug that lasts years. If you are installing stone flooring from scratch, the cost runs between €200 and €500 per room. That is a significant investment, but it is a permanent one. The floor does not wear out. It does not require maintenance. It just works, every day, for the life of the building. But this next one takes it even further. At number 3, there is one on this list almost nobody knows about, and it is hiding in plain sight in every older home on the continent. It is a February morning in a rural Swedish farmhouse, circa 1910. The temperature outside is -18. The family woke up warm, not because the fire burned all night. It did not. They woke up warm because every gap in that building, every crack around a door frame, every split between floorboards, every hairline gap around a windowsill had been pressed full of raw sheep's wool and linen strips the previous autumn. The cold had nowhere to enter. The warmth had nowhere to escape. Drafts are the silent killer of home heat retention. Research into residential heat loss consistently identifies infiltration, cold air entering through gaps and cracks, as responsible for up to 40% of total heat loss in older homes. Not through walls, not through roofs, through gaps. Most of those gaps are invisible to the naked eye. You cannot see a 2mm crack around a door frame, but cold air at -15 can find it in seconds. It moves along the floor in a thin, invisible current, dropping the perceived temperature of the room by 2 or 3 degrees before anyone realizes the source. The Nordic solution to this problem predates modern foam sealants by centuries. Raw sheep's wool and linen strips pressed firmly into door frames, window gaps, floorboard cracks, and the joints around skirting boards. Swedish building heritage studies document this as standard rural practice across the 18 and 1900s. It was not considered a repair. It was considered seasonal maintenance, as normal as stacking firewood. Every autumn, before the first hard frost, the women of the household would work their way around every exterior-facing surface, with handfuls of carded wool and strips of linen cut from worn-out clothing, pressing the material into every gap they could find with their fingertips. The wool went in soft and loose, then compressed under the pressure of the frame and held. You could run your hand along the sealed door frame on a bitter night and feel nothing. No breath of cold. Just the faint lanolin smell of the wool doing its job in the dark. Here is why wool works better than foam for this application. Wool is naturally hygroscopic. That means it absorbs and releases moisture without losing its insulating properties. Foam sealants, when exposed to moisture cycling, condensation, humidity fluctuation, freeze-thaw cycles, can degrade, crack, and shrink over time. Wool does not. It swells slightly when damp, which actually improves the seal. It compresses under pressure and expands to fill irregular gaps. It resists mold in conditions where foam would trap moisture and rot, and it lasts for decades without replacement. That is not a typo, by the way. Decades. There are documented examples in Swedish heritage building restoration projects where original wool draft seals from the early 20th century were found still functional when walls were opened during renovation. The wool had compressed and darkened with age, but retained its insulating and sealing properties. No modern foam product can make that claim with any confidence. The application process requires no tools and no skill. You press wool into the gap with your fingers. You add a linen strip over the top to hold it in place if the gap is exposed to regular movement, such as around a door frame. You work around the entire perimeter of every exterior door and window in the building. The whole process for a standard room takes under an hour. The cost is negligible. Sheep's wool draft seals for a full door run under €20. Linen strips cost almost nothing. The materials are available at any farm supply or craft supplier across Northern Europe. This method is a strong contender for the most impactful on this list, because it is not addressing a small edge effect. It is closing off 40% of your heat loss with materials that cost less than a restaurant meal. The impact is felt immediately. Within an hour of sealing a drafty room, occupants consistently report a noticeable increase in perceived warmth even before any active heat source is used. The room feels different, stiller. The cold fingers of infiltrating air are gone. What remains is the warmth that was already there, finally given nowhere to go. The candle flame on the table stops flickering. That is how you know the gaps are sealed. That small, still flame is the proof. The room has been closed, the cold has been locked out, and the warmth that was already inside has finally been given permission to stay. That one was simple. The next one saves you even more. The bottle filled from the wood stove kettle, placed in the bed 20 minutes before sleep. The oldest targeted heat delivery system in the Nordic world, and it costs under €15, requires zero electricity, and lasts for decades. What the Danes figured out, foil behind the fire, 30% more warmth, €5, that knowledge stays. Watch this next.